let me call Dr. Keith Elder up. He is the Dean of the Samford University School of Public Health, and he will moderate this panel and start. And let me ask the last four speakers to come up and sit at the table. And he's going to address some questions first to the speakers, and then he will see questions from the audience. And let me say, too, that, excuse me? If you ask a question, we've got microphones now that someone will come up and put a microphone in front of your face so that we all can hear what you're saying.
All right, I guess we'll start, but I think this has been quite an informative session. So during this time, we're going to ask that you ask questions and not so much comments. So if you have questions, we're going to start with the audience, because just in case anyone has to leave. So if you have questions for any of the panelists, please ask them now.
So, Josh Mitchell, Georgetown. I'm enough of a social scientist like Glenn to say, well, there are all these obstacles in the way, and we got to solve these problems, and these immense impediments, we're not even sure going to be able to solve them. But I'm also enough of a theologian to say, hallelujah, the only thing that's going to work is the sacrificial lamb for all of us. So, what I'd love to hear is this, or one group is right and the other's wrong, or is there kind of both and, where we pay attention to the theological, do everything we can, even though knowing full well it's the grace of God, but then also be smart social scientists and think through this thing sort of theoretically as well. I don't want to say without God, but we also have to think about this as mere mortals as well. And I took Glenn to be saying largely that, right? And Eugene moving in the other direction. I think Bob somewhere in the middle, that it's the grace of God, but here are the practical steps that also work. So is it all the above? Is one better than the other?
It's all of the above. And see, what's interesting is that right now there's this major intellectual crisis among the leadership class. And for the poor, I mean, the brilliant stuff that Glenn has been doing forever, it's going to be interdisciplinary. It's going to be interdisciplinary. Now, what a lot of the social scientists thought, some, present company excluded, is that you didn't need the theology. Or a philosophically based normative framework that had some theological undergirding. But all of that has collapsed. And the challenge for the theological community is to now engage more actively. The work that Glenn Loury's been doing, the theological community needs to engage more with that social science. I mean, part of the failure of the evangelical theological paradigm is that in the 20th century, they never did social science. There was no social theory, there were no social scientists. If you went to Fuller, if you went to any of the theological seminaries, there wasn't any interdisciplinary research where you engaged the social sciences, and for that reason, we were not taken seriously.
Let me just say that most people in America out on the hinterlands, they want to see a sermon. They don't want to hear it.
Yeah, that's right.
They want to see those principles demonstrated in their lives. When I say to somebody, here's someone who was a heroin addict and a prostitute last year, now they've been delivered. Here's someone who was a predator, and now they've been delivered. That's what people want to see. The problem is people on the left have a ground game.
Say it, Don.
They have books for children they are actually out delivering things to people. If you go to a conservative religious conference and you have a seminar on religious freedom, Hobby Lobby, it's packed. The crisis isn't what the left is doing to religious freedom, is that your pulpits, your pews are empty. Because your children are not seeing you demonstrate Christ in the lives of those that are in need. And the left is doing that. So what I'm saying to believers and saying to conservatives, demonstrate to people the validity of Christ. And then if you have to preach to them, preach to them.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Come on, y'all. Somebody got to ask something.
I'm curious, insofar as racial stigma is a part of the equation, can anyone crudely quantify how big a part of the equation it is? And I'm thinking more of maybe not people who are overt white supremacist, racist types, but average, white folks. How big a part in your experience of the equation is that?
It's real big. Large, because even with my own peers and colleagues, I can talk. Okay, well, yeah, but what are we going to do about our race getting ahead? I said, didn't we just say we were all one race? And so, really, everybody today heard we are one blood and one race. And I don't necessarily want to see you raise your hand, but first you have to know if you agree. And then you have to be ready to, every time you get ready to say that, not say it. And so it's something that has been indoctrinated, not just in America, but around the world. Because even in India, the caste systems, or in South Africa at one time, the blacks, the coloreds, and the whites, all that stuff. It's been years. Satan has divided us like that.
That's right.
And so we just have to go back saying, I'm not playing that. I'm not doing that. And I do see. So it's a lie. People, if I get so upset, I almost lost my job because a little sweet lady came, I'm colorblind. Wow. Ma'am, you need glasses. You can't see. And she was so offended, she took her check and went home.
Stop.
Oh, yeah, she was mad. And they were like, this was a fundraiser. Why did you do that? But I go ballistic on that. I can't take it anymore. So it's all right now because it's all good and people are really getting the point. But it's really massive. If we took a poll and you all just had to write it down, half of you at least would still say you're of a different race. Because it's indoctrinated. You have to fight it.
Let me say something here. We live in a secular culture. The political elites are not theists.
That's right.
The people who control the media,
Not at all.
the people who define what we see on our television screens, they don't believe in God.
That's right.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s civic meaning has been de-Christianized.
That's right.
It's very hard
Well put.
to draw a distinction between him and Malcolm X. And I mean no disrespect to our
Or
Muslim
Gandhi,
brothers and sisters.
or anybody.
I mean no disrespect to them. But the reason that King's movement so seized the American imagination is because it resonated with profound religious and cultural values that are at the root of the founding of the country.
Absolutely.
His Christianity was not incidental. It was not irrelevant to the meaning of his movement.
That's right.
So, I think we have to reckon with the reality of the political/cultural condition in which we find ourselves. And I'm not saying that we should abandon our own principles, but I'm saying that appeals to religious authority as instruments for mobilizing public action are going to always be limited in the United States of America that we live in. Maybe in one that's coming in the future, I don't know. Now, I draw a distinction between that observation about American public life and the things that I was talking about African American communal life. There, I want to say, as I said at lunchtime or whenever I said it, Reverend Jasper Williams, who spoke at Aretha Franklin's
He
funeral.
sure did. He told the truth.
He was telling the truth. And not only that, he was saying it in a way that for a large fraction of the African American population, people could understand it and be moved by it because it appealed to authorities that they recognize. The fact that twice the rate of abortion amongst African American women is twice what it is amongst white women. And yet, where, other than here, do we see in African American leadership a foregrounding of that issue and a drawing of the, I mean, I could go on in this vein, but mobilizing the religious fidelity of the African American population on behalf of answering the questions of the sort that I was raising in my little talk. Who are we? What do we owe to our children? What are our responsibilities to our ancestors? How are we going to live with one another? I think is feasible. Using the religious framing for public mobilization of civic action in the American Republic, I am much less optimistic about.
There's just a quick, I think there's a dimension of this that I believe that evidence should confront an argument. Evidence is the best confrontator of an argument. And the problem with looking at life through a racial prism, it is most injurious to the least of these, to low-income blacks. It's most injurious to them. You know why? Because evil has to wear a white face before we address it. Geraldo Rivera did a 2-hour documentary some 4 years ago on the sexual exploitation and rape of women in our prisons. Every one of the victims was a black woman. Every one of the perpetrators was a black man. It never generated a single discussion among the Me Too movement or the civil rights people or others. And all the women wanted was an 800 number, so when they're being assaulted, they could call, and there was not even any support for that. Wasn't even a discussion.
That's right. That's right.
And that's how we need to begin to present the adverse effect of concentrating on race. We need to talk about it. 23 young black children under the age of 5 were killed by other black men. I got pictures of them here.
That's right.
My problem isn't white people.
That's right.
If you all went to Canada and Europe tomorrow, it would not stop this.
That's right. That's right.
And that's what we've got to present to people when they issue a racial argument to us. We got to present them with evidence.
I do have a problem with white people on one level, though. Stop saying your people have to get along with my people. Now I'm colorblind. I'm so sorry what my ancestors did. I'm sorry too. I'm sorry what my ancestors did and the stuff Bob is talking about. But we are one race, so that's the only problem I have. That's the only problem. We are one race. That's my only problem.
Let me just pick up on Bob's point. One of the most disgraceful examples of the point that Bob made. One of the most extraordinary examples, and this is real deep, is Art Kelly.
R. Kelly.
Art Kelly.
Yeah.
But R. Kelly was molested too. Don't forget that.
I got that. No, I'm
Don't
with
forget
you.
that.
No,
I'm not no excuse. I'm just saying.
What's that got to do with it?
You got to go all the way back through the generations
What
and
does
get
that
to
have
the
to do with
root
what
of
you
what is
do?
making this happen.
Oh, no,
What does that got to do with it?
No, hold
I'm
on.
not excusing them. I'm just mentioning it.
I'm just saying. She's just saying. Right.
I'm just saying.
I'm just saying. Listen, the issue of Art Kelly and that black man praying, to Bob's and Glenn's point, that is absolutely unconscionable. The fact that there was complete silence over this absolutely
Didn't say a
disgusting
word.
guy.
Didn't say a word.
See, on that one, I wouldn't do it myself, but I would not be adverse to the Old Testament application of some correction.
And it's got to be dealt with. And then they jumped on Gladys Knight for singing the anthem.
Right.
Oh, Lord. Go, I'm sorry.
And Mary Poppins. Don't forget her. She
Mary
played
Poppins
little-
is a witch, y'all. I hope y'all know that. But she's a that's witchcraft. I don't know if I was supposed to say that in here. But she is a witch. Sorry.
I think this is a kind of a good segue when I'm thinking since black folk aren't monolithic,
Right.
and if you control for what a whole lot of folks you're saying, if you control for income, race, where people not race, but if you control for income, location, et cetera, and we're still seeing these significant differences, and the only predictor of if this is race, then why isn't it race? If I'm talking about income, I'm talking about health, I'm talking about all this other. So if it's not race, but race is the only significant predictor, why isn't it race?
Sin is the most significant predictor,
Well,
not race.
So you have to control for that. So if it's not that, if you can control for sin and all this other, you can control for, if you say some behavioral issues, if race is still the only consistent thing coming up, why isn't
This is his
To
question.
make you
Because-
not look at sin.
Okay, but hold on. There's another way to put his question. Well, okay, sin's the problem. Why is there so much sin with the blacks? I mean, that's another way.
Okay, because the people have not understood the truth. I say to people all the time, baby, you're just as, my granddaddy would do it. He said, I'm a man. Has nothing to do with my car. I heard him say that till he left the planet. Martin Luther King Sr. He went to the store with his son, Martin, to get some shoes. The Caucasian there says, well, y'all are Negroes or whatever, and you can't try on shoes here. And you know, my granddaddy took money. I mean, he used to carry a lot of money, too. Hey, this is green. I tell you what, I'm not giving it to you today. Goodbye. And he walked out. That store did desegregate, and the people who owned that store, Mr. Sweatman was his name. He said, anytime you come in my store, Reverend King, you never have to buy another pair of shoes. You come in here, you try them on, you get them. Mr. Sweatman lost white customers. He didn't care. Because Daddy King, everywhere he went, he would do that. And I do it now. And I have a bad habit. When they start doing the little, I say, is it because I'm black? I learned it from Granddaddy. So we are one race. It's a sin to think you're another race. Acts 17:26 is true. We are one blood.
Wait, let me ask this though, on your point. If I read the Bible, there were Greeks, there were Egyptians, there
Arabs.
were Cushites.
Yeah.
All right, so there are at least 1,000 different groups,
Ethnic groups.
and national groups.
National groups.
Right? So, biblically, the book ain't against identifying people that are particular groups.
Every nation, tongue, tribe.
Right, yeah, okay.
Not race.
Okay, okay, we talk about that. For example,
okay.
in the Daniel 10th chapter, it was the Prince of Persia. We got the Israelites getting jacked up by the Babylonians, right? And you got the 3 Hebrew boys, right? Say, they's from North Philly. I'm not having it. We ain't bending and bowing to nothing, right? So you have national identity.
Yes.
Gene, man, God is no respecter of persons.
That doesn't mean that don't mean you're not an Egyptian.
Him and worketh righteousness.
Amen.
Didn't say that there weren't any nations.
So you're
It said that God was no respecter of persons.
I'm not arguing about respect to person. There was a question. No, I'm gonna push on this, Doc.
Push.
It was a question of identity. I'm not saying God plays favorites. I'm simply saying that when an Egyptian dude walks in the store and he's Egyptian and he speaks Arabic and he doesn't speak Farsi, all I'm saying is that these identities.
But it's not skin color. It's not skin color.
Oh, I get that.
Skin color racism is such a lie.
No, I understand that. But see, this is to your point about the race thing. When you get into the black thing, there are some things that are unique to African Americans. Orlando Patterson just done a series of studies, and Orlando, he's Jamaican, but he go in on the brothers, right? He said, look, you American Negroes, I don't know what your problem is, man. I do all these studies, and every time I do that research, man, you American Negroes come up all jacked up. And Patterson, in fact, he's a colleague of Glenn's. And Patterson don't make no excuses. The out of wedlock birth, why do you American Negroes come up? And it's a legitimate question. I'm black. I come from North Philly. I got some problems. And because the squad I ran with did certain things, Glenn, disproportionately.
But do white people, do y'all have children out of wedlock? Don't answer that. I'm sorry.
I think
But
we
see,
People have children out of
but
wedlock.
this is the
Get
thing.
some more questions.
White people don't need me to fix their problem.
Well, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
think
doctor.
we- I think- I
You
think
hear
we
what
have a
my brother said
question.
over there, right?
Yeah, we have a
You
question
Negroes
up
better
front.
fix yourself.
You have-
Yes. Get a microphone for the professor.
Can I be excused? This is getting too deep for me. I can't handle it.
You ain't going nowhere, y'all.
I feel like whether you call it race or ethnicity, there are some real differences between and among people. And in the Bible, if you look at all of God's creation, there's variety. You know, there's not. I mean, so there are varieties among people, and I think we have different strengths. I guess Thomas Sowell's research talks about differences between and across ethnic groups, and that's a reality. And when it comes to the black community, I think, you know, there's certain cultural things, and I believe the reason we regressed is that, you know, the liberal left's narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know who we are. We don't know our strengths.
And well, my background of coming out of poverty and all of that, the one thing I didn't have was people in my life that were middle-class blacks telling me how disadvantaged I was and how the world was stacked against me. And by the time I got to graduate school and learned how oppressed I was already successful.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Yes.
Well put.
Yes.
Well put.
I love it.
That's great.
Yeah, I see another question way in the back.
That's good.
That was good. Carol, that was good.
Really good.
This is responding to whoever challenged us to use our imagination, because that was really a powerful moment. And this is an attempt, maybe Abraham Heschel's book, The Prophet,
Come on, Doc.
was a handbook
Yes, sir.
of so many of the civil rights leaders.
Yep.
And you know, his mysticism as a rabbi somehow gripped King and others, you know, and so is there, particularly since we have our Jewish friends and brothers here, how can we, in this moment, I don't know, this is a very creative moment, can we use our imagination?
Can I say something on that? I just was talking to, where's my colleague at? This colleague. One of the most important things which should happen, but what remarkably didn't happen, on the 50th anniversary of King's assassination, there should have been a major King-Heschel conference. As close as Heschel was to King, right? I mean, Abraham Heschel, the prophets, and the intimate relationship they had, and Abraham Heschel was faithful and consistent to King to the end. When his own boys cut out on him. So let me just recommend to whoever's here, there is a major symposium to be done on Abraham Heschel and Martin Luther King because of their common commitment to Scripture.
Yeah.
The voice of the prophets.
Yes.
I mean, one of the masterworks of the second half of the 20th century is Heschel's book. And Heschel's book, in addition to King's teaching, has to be recaptured because we don't have anything else. And so now we've got to go back to first principles and figure out how we translate King and Heschel in moving into the next decade of the 20th century, 21st century.
Bob is saying something.
No, it's the same thing. He just needs, King needs to be revised.
Come on,
and-
Don,
and,
say it.
Yeah,
That's what I'm talking
Christ isn't even on the monument.
about.
Yeah, that's true.
Not even on the monument.
Yeah.
Come on, that's right. And the Heschel thing,
He won't even know he's a Christian.
where'd my dude go?
Go ahead.
Hey, we go. I should talk to, yeah, listen, man. You Jewish brothers need to take the leadership, because he's part of your squad, to do a King Heschel conference. No, I mean, wait a minute. I mean,
No, that would
Heschel
be
and
good,
King
yeah.
are, am I missing something?
No, you're not. That's that point.
Stop.
To Montgomery a few years ago.
Very good.
When the movie Selma came out, it was noted that there was nothing really there about, very little about C.T. Vivian, for one thing,
Right.
who was a major player.
That's right.
And Abraham Heschel, who was such a major player in Selma and Montgomery. And so, and I'm an evangelical Christian, but I'm a historian and an intercessor.
Praise God.
And I want to talk to you about the intercession prayer thing. Because, we can move the hearts of men, but we've done nothing. But if we move angels and demons,
Come on,
like
Doctor.
Daniel did,
We
then
talking Holy Ghost now.
something's, who can get a prayer through?
Yes,
That's what
sir.
we need to say. But I ought to say, Susanna is a Dartmouth College Jewish studies and women's studies professor. We have very little in common in terms of our politics, but it was a very powerful moment to gather the rabbis there in Montgomery and Christian community and, to honor this man in a way that the movie didn't. And so, movies have such an impact on the next generation. I'm a campus minister, that we need to do some things to fill in the story some.
There needs to be a film on Heschel and the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
Brother back there.
All right. So, like, as someone mentioned earlier, King is kind of, his words are put to the point where it's palatable to the contemporary context.
Right.
But, April 3rd, 1968, when he was, at Mason's Temple, he said some really tough things. And things that I think that could actually help us. So it's dealing with group economics. And so this is a really good question for the economists up there. To what extent would you encourage group economics amongst African Americans? Because like what Dr. King said, he said we should anchor our external action with economic withdrawal from certain companies. He actually named a few companies so that pressure can be applied to certain companies so that they can kind of ensure that action be taken in helping African American communities. Now, this is 68. So understanding that we're all one people, we're all, but at the same time, and I love how my Jewish brothers, how their dollars circulate very well amongst their own community before it leaves.
They know how to do that.
Right, they know how to do it very well. I greatly respect that. And I noticed that like in Montgomery, Alabama, we have the Indian population. They're moving in, and they're moving into the African American community, but their dollars circulate amongst themselves. They won't allow anyone into the hotel chain or anything like that, or even the convenience store business. So I'm just wondering to what extent, and we actually see this in our communities down there, so to what extent would you guys encourage group economics amongst African Americans?
What I would, go ahead, Glenn.
No, I'll be brief. I'm not against it. I don't see anything wrong with people trying to help one another based upon their ethnic affiliation, but it's no panacea.
Right.
In fact, it's pushing against the general tendency in economic relations toward globalization.
Right.
We're not going to solve the economic problems of the black community by trading with one another.
Come on, Doc.
We have to acquire skills. We have to accumulate capital. That can be facilitated by people like communal lending societies, black banking, and things of that sort. If I had a choice walking down the avenue, going to this store, that store, and I know this one is black-owned, I might have a slight orientation or preference to go that way. But I don't see a whole lot of traction there in terms of the larger problems of economic development for African-American communities.
Can I jump on that really fast? Because I agree with that. But in my own community, because I just moved out of one community into one that was broader with many more ethnicities, and I have to go back to the community where I was. But all the years that I was there, I would go to the managers if something was wrong. I would say, I thought you might just want to know this wasn't cooked that way. Or your shells, if you said, and I would take my time and I would tell them I learned that from my granddaddy. So I think that it's more important in every community, including our community, not to make us the best black one, but the best period. and bring those standards back to our own folks and teach it again in schools, teach it again in church, teach it again at home, so that wherever we are in any part of the world, in any community, we stand up tall as a part of that community, and to just be excellent, period. Excellence should not know a skin color, in my opinion.
Let me just add another comment to that. We have a film that we discovered in my office. It's called Negro Durham. And our young people need to understand there was a time in the Hayti section of Durham, North Carolina, and we had a Black Wall Street, that we had the median income of people in Durham in the 40s was comparable to any whites in the country. Our property value was comparable to whites. The first company to manufacture nylon stockings and distribute them around the country was a black-owned company. They hired an all-white sales force during the time of segregation. Their national sales force was white, but their local was black. And so I think young people really need to understand that there was a time when we did that. I'm not an economist, but I do know this. According to David Birch, any ethnic group's participation in the economy depends upon their small business formation rate. The healthy community generates 3 businesses per 1,000 people per year. We generate 3 per 100,000 per year. So, but I think looking at films, looking at our past, when we were entrepreneurial, we had a higher business formation rate in the 20s than whites did. We had a real estate company in Harlem that had over 200 people. No, in Harlem.
No, but he's
But
talking about
Tulsa had the Black Wall Street. in
Tulsa,
Tulsa,
Greenwood too, and it burned down, but they rebuilt in 5 years.
Yeah.
But so the point that I made, we always concentrate on our deficits instead of being inspired to say, if we were able to generate a whole business, not one of the 100 businesses in Durham went down during the Depression because black people had a buy-in, a boycott. And so all I'm saying is that we really need to, when we're sitting with our young people, we need to offer them visions of what it is possible to accomplish instead of always bombarding them about failures. Yeah. You can learn nothing from studying failure except how to create failure.
Okay, sweetie. Just on your question, if Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King were here today, and he had his colleagues, one of the issues, because he was very farsighted when he was trying to think through his ideas around economics, he would have to be talking about the digital revolution, artificial intelligence, and the labor force. Right now, the game has changed, and we don't know. This artificial intelligence thing is going to revolutionize everything. I've heard, and here again we've got the economist here, and Martin Luther King would be talking about what we do to save a labor force where 50% of the labor force may be knocked out as a function of artificial intelligence and the robotization of everything. Right. And that's a life-death issue. Yeah. And so on the King thing 2019, part of what the real King discussion needs to be about is how you're going to work and lay the foundation to save 50% of black people who will get knocked out of the labor force, and there'll be no place to go. To Professor Lowry's point,
it's not a racial issue.
Well, no, for black people, it's a black issue for me. No, I got it. It ain't racial, but
the implications of technical change hit Americans who are working class people.
I'm not disputing that. I'm just looking out for black people.
In the same way. Well, what I'm talking about is I'm responding to the question that was asked.
I agree there's no
businesses should be started. Let me finish.
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
We should start businesses. That doesn't mean that we have to start businesses by focusing on patronizing among ourselves.
No, agreed.
No group of Americans got rich by just trading with themselves.
No, agreed.
Jews are just a small few percent of the population. They don't become billionaires by trading with themselves.
Agreed.
Of course there's nepotism. Of course there's nepotism. Okay, including ethnic nepotism. Right. It's not a pathway to development.
Right. Agreed. I don't think anybody's arguing with you. Okay. I'm just black.
Okay.
I completely agree with the
Well, you
last.
have to clean up your own house before you go out and try to do some other stuff. I agree with that, but
Of course they did.
John 3:16 is for everybody, and it's not
Amen.
based on skin color.
That's
all
right.
I can say.
John 3:16.
Okay. And that's nice to say, but the reality on the ground, the situation on the ground is race does matter, skin does matter. I'm in the trenches every day here in Birmingham, so
They blew up my house at 63. I
okay,
get it.
I've never had my house blown up, but
I
but-
get it.
Race
but,
matters.
But every day, race matters.
The
So,
human race. You're not a separate race.
if that's the way you understand it, I see it. But there are hundreds of kids that I talk to weekly.
But that's what the Bible says.
No, he ain't arguing with that.
Finish.
I'm a pastor. I know
I
what the
got
word
you.
says.
I'm
But-
gonna let
but-
you
but
have
there-
it, sir.
there
Go
are
ahead.
hundreds. There are hundreds of children that I speak to, whose stomachs are hungry, and they aren't doing well in school, and there are some systemic problems that we have, and it sounds like there's this unified tone that there's no accountability for.
Absolutely not saying that. It is wrong to treat somebody a certain way because their skin is a certain color. That is a sin.
Okay, but
It is a grievous crime
but-
against
but-
humanity.
Let me make
yeah,
this point.
okay. So now,
Go ahead, man.
but there's also a sentiment, the internal patterns you're always saying, almost like, lace up your bootstraps and you can get it done. And I
No.
believe that, but everybody don't have boots.
I agree.
And so,
I'm not saying that.
So my question is, versus just this way of seeing it, and almost I can't think of the term, but there's a almost a condescending tone that I'm getting. Yeah, and it's a little offensive.
I know
And-
it is.
And I'm in the trenches. Mr. Woodward, I love everything you say, everything you do, but I got to get your card before we leave. But there are those that want to do better. No one in the ghetto wants to be there, but they're there because they're doing the best they can with the information they have. So they're information deserts. So those of us with information, we come to places like this and talk among scholars, and nobody's getting the information to them. Dr. Young said a person without information is forced to lean on their imagination. So they imagine what being a father looks like, or they imagine what being a mother looks like, because they didn't have good examples themselves. And so instead of just saying you're doing it wrong, how about let's say, let me show you how to do it.
Let me help you. Let me come in the trenches with you.
Yes.
I live in the trenches. That's what I'm trying to say to you. So, but I'm just trying to say it is not based on, it is evil. I've had people shake my hand, and they had Caucasian skin and I have brown skin, and drop the hand and wipe the hand off. They still do it today. And I say, why are you doing that? I said, if we both get cut and we got the same blood type, you might need my blood, honey. But I say that all the time. I don't play the skin color game, because we should never be mistreated because of the color of our skin. But some of us begin to think less of ourselves based on that too. And so, but I was just brought up in a way, because our family was a kaleidoscope, from all various colors. And to me, everybody was pretty. I used to cry because I wanted to look like my mama. And I thought something was wrong with me. My brothers laughed. We don't know where they got you, And they would pick on me because I didn't look like them. So I understand all that. But we are human beings. It doesn't mean to be condescending. Yes, people mistreat us because of the color of our skin. It happens to me, right? I'm telling you, right here in Inslee, Birmingham, my house got blown up. I was in the bed. I still get it. I got dead people, my uncle, my daddy, skin color dead. But it's wrong. And we can no longer think less of ourselves, I don't let anybody make me feel less than who I am because of my skin color.
Yeah, but you have a PhD.
No, well, yes, I do. It's a divinity.
I really want to understand your question, because I really do, and I'm saying it sincerely, because I'm in the trenches too. And when we had those 53 murders out there, we stopped it, not white people, because white folks weren't down there shooting. We stopped it. We took charge of the community. People could use the ball field at night when they couldn't before. That has got to spread throughout, and people need to invest. Now, people talk about voter suppression. The greatest voter suppression in the urban centers where I go is apathy. We got in a high crime areas, only 6% of the people are voting in an area because they don't feel there's any point to it. Even their own people who are in power are running the housing authority, running the healthcare system, are not delivering for those people in their own city. So how can we lay that at the feet of somebody else?
No, but see, I think there was a different statement being made, if I caught it right. See, what I heard the pastor say, I'm with y'all, I get it, but why do I sense, if I understood you correctly, right? And the young lady here, right? A patronizing tone. No, I'm just telling you what they said.
Well, let's help them find out why they do, because it's not meant to be.
Okay, no, and I'm just trying to.
Because I'll go to war with you if somebody disrespects you because of skin color. I'll go to war with you.
And I'm just trying to hear what the pastor was saying, right? I'm not defending nothing. There was something going on in the interaction.
Let me say this.
Let the sister talk. Let the sister talk. Let the sister talk. Yeah.
I just want to say one thing very quickly. I did not say black people pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. I said exactly the opposite.
But you did say that.
I said
you did.
This is not a communal, it's a national disgrace. I said precisely the attitude that turns your back on people because they got a messed up culture is the wrong attitude. That's exactly what I said.
Okay. Go ahead, sister.
I'm going to sit and embrace a space of humility. What I thought I heard you say was that Jews, and I am an Orthodox Jew, born and raised in New York in a community that definitely trades with itself at all times, at every occasion, and has built itself up to be one of the greatest communities and wealthiest communities in this country by doing so. What I heard you say is that they didn't do it that way, and as such, black folks don't need to. What I will say to you is this. I am a yeshiva graduate. I graduated from the very same school as the rabbi on that dais. And I will tell you that when we were raised in yeshivas, we were told what we would be. We were told, oh, there are dentists missing in the community. Well, guess what? You need to be a dentist. We were told, you do not shop outside of Kingston Avenue. You make sure that you shop in Borough Park, in Flatbush, in Crown Heights, and nowhere else because our dollars will serve our community and no other. Let me say this as an Orthodox Jew. Unity and self-love is what preserves the Jewish community, not just dollars. For me to sit here in the presence of clergy downing black folk for trying to empower other black folk, to me is offensive and insulting. To say that there are not systems in place that do not cripple, that do not handicap young black men and women is a disgrace. When I was a correction officer on Rikers Island, let me give you this example. When someone was arrested in the black community in Crown Heights, they would go months and months before they could A, raise bail, or they could get a trial date. In the Jewish community, I would walk to the corner of Eastern Parkway with other rabbis, and the bail would be raised in 1 hour. Not only would it be raised in 1 hour, but I would receive a call as a Jewish officer telling me to make sure I was present at intake because we were going to take that young man, put him in a separate cell, make sure he had kosher food, make sure that he had every single thing he needed, and that he would be out within 24 to 48 hours. There is a disparity in resources, there is an inequity in treatment, and it needs to be owned. And it's not because of faith, it's not because of the devil, it's because of the way we see people. The way we see them makes them seem more human to some and more demonic to others. That needs to be owned. And until we own that ourselves, it will not change.
I own that. I don't know how you missed that. That is exactly my point, which is why I have been fighting for prison equity, getting all our black folks out of jail who were put into jail because they needed money to build more jails, and we know exactly who did it. And I am totally, I'm saying that, do you understand? I did not say they were doing it to themselves. As a matter of fact, I'm on the book for calling the names of the people who did it. And I took a list all the way up to Washington and said, get them out. And I am one of the biggest fighters for that reform. And so if you heard that, I pray that you can hear what we're really saying. It is a sin, it is evil to discriminate against people based upon skin color. It is a sin to continue, well, we do too. We shouldn't discriminate against ourselves either. That's what I'm saying. We need to know exactly who we are in Christ Jesus. The devil does have something to do with it because we've been so convinced that we have separate races and that our race has to fight for what we are. We are really, honest to goodness, the human race. That's what I'm saying.
What she said, just on her point, she said, look, if we're going to sit up here and deny the existence of black self-hatred, that being a dynamic.
Who denied it?
No, I'm not saying anybody. Oh. What I'm saying is she put on the table.
Okay.
And see, what I'm simply suggesting is that we try to hear.
Yeah.
What I heard the young lady say is that, look, one dimension of this thing is a lack of self-love on the part of the black community. Now, some folk may live in different black communities, but everyone I done come from that I've worked in, that's a dynamic that we have to work with. I used to mess around with Bishop Herbert Daughtry and the National Black United Front down in Brooklyn in the late 70s and 80s. And one of the issues would come up when they were doing the organizing there is around the issue, how do we address in a way that is sensitive, and if you're a Christian, caring, the self-hatred, the wounds of internalized, whatever you want to call it, that afflict our people, and that's real. I mean, and we can be, whatever, but that's a real reality on the ground. And black people should have the space where, as opposed to being didactic, we say, you know what, I hear that. And that's real. The dynamic of and there's volumes of literature on this that are serious literature on how the black community engages that issue.
Well, that's what Bob teaches. He teaches it all the time. That's what I do. That's what we do economically. I hope we're telling folks, when you get paid, put it back not only in your community, but put it back into something you're building. Don't go run out of your community and spend it all somewhere else and then don't have anything. Just build it back up. I mean, we are teaching that.
Look, there's a tape, and I've got a text. I'll make the text available. You can see what I have written and what I have said, and you can respond to that. This here, with all this anger, I'm not going to defend myself against that.
Oh, there's no anger, there's pain.
Pain. It's pain.
Well, I have done nothing wrong here. I have said nothing that's disrespectful of black people. I have not failed to acknowledge the depth of American racism. My text and my talk did not do any of those things. Okay? So I have nothing to apologize about. Nothing.
It's okay. That's all right.
No, you're not going to front me and basically call me an Uncle Tom.
That's
what I didn't say. What you said, I said.
That's just what they heard. It's not what you necessarily what you said. It's what they heard.
That's not what was said.
So let's it's fine. So let's do this. I mean, this has been robust conversation.
Sister.
This has been great conversations. But I suggest, since we're at the 45-minute mark, that you all give one take-home point, and then we'll close. This has been great. So the panel, you all give.
I'm good. I'll pass.
Okay.
I will take a point on pain, because America's in pain. The world is in pain. Pain really does not know a color. We are in pain, but we really are human. We are human beings. We all bleed the same. A great injustice has been done to the Native Americans. A great injustice has been done to the Africans who came. A great injustice was done when our own African brothers and sisters sold us and put us on the boat. And so all of that does have to be repaired, but we actually need each other. Everybody in America is an immigrant except the Native Americans, by the way. I don't know if anybody actually knows that. So I do hear pain,
I'm part of Native
and we felt safe enough to expose it. Now that it is exposed, I ask that the love of God cause us to embrace each other, and the healing continues in the name of Jesus.
And I'll just add that I think all of us, we have a standard practice at my organization at our meetings, that you're not permitted to bring a problem to the table unless you have a solution. And I think that from now on, anytime anybody wants to articulate a problem, they need to have their solution. But don't leave it out there that somehow somebody at some distant place is responsible. I tell my young people who I deal with every day, I say 80% I'm gonna X something. The victimizer might have knocked you down, but the victim has to get up. 90% of, 10% of what happens to you is external. 90% is what you do with the 10%, which means that your destiny is in your own hands. And anybody that teaches anything else is practicing white supremacy, to say that somehow my life is controlled by somebody at some distant white power structure. That's white supremacy. And I reject that. And so I just think, on a positive note, we all ought to be compelled to offer a solution for any problem we bring to the table. If we do that, I think that we'll have a much more robust and fruitful discussion. So I hope that we can have that as one of the standards of discourse. At least that's what they are in my organization. Don't get up and just bring us a problem. Tell me what your solution is, okay?
Well,
Thank you.
Well, again, let's thank this esteemed panel again.
Good job, Doc. Good job.
And thank you, Keith. And we'll see you all tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock.